Hello, my name is Spencer and welcome back to my hobby channel. I enjoy storytelling through dioramas and painting other miniature projects. This is a giant octopus miniature from Dungeons & Dragons. For this project, I'm taking place in an art challenge set by Boylai Hobbytime and his community. The abstract is monster encounters, and I thought this would be a great use of the octopus. For some conflict in the diorama, I ordered this pirate ship off of Etsy. I'll include the link below. I was very satisfied with the product. Ultimately, the vision is the octopus will be rising out of the water and flipping the ship into the ocean. Before painting, I wanted to address some of the larger cracks on the giant octopus model. To help solve those cracks, I used some liquid green epoxy from Citadel to fill it in. Ultimately, these details aren't 100% necessary, but I kind of am a perfectionist sometimes. Once the prep work is done, we can flip my hobby mat over to the painting side. For the base of this diorama, I'll be using a 5" by 5" gesso board. Usually these are strong enough to support the resin, and it provides ample space for the miniatures. To begin, I primed the base black using my very official airbrush station. For this diorama, I want it to take place in the middle of the deep dark ocean, so I want to make sure I give the appearance of deep water, even though the resin will not be that deep of a pour. I also took this opportunity to prime both the miniatures black at this point. For the deep ocean color, I then made a very dark brown color to make it a little less cartoony and a little bit more earthy. I then sprayed the dark earth color on top of the black to give it a little bit more of a realistic feel. Then I applied a zenithal highlight to both of the miniatures of this diorama. Then I collected all the materials needed for a resin pour. I started by masking off each of the sides of the diorama base with masking tape. This will make it easier to remove the paste later. Then I prepared the acrylic sheets to be attached to the side of the masking tape. I did this using a silicone caulk. This prevents the resin from seeping onto my table. Then I applied enough pressure to each of the sides to make sure that there were no gaps in the silicone and that it was airtight. I then repeated 4 times for each of the 4 sides. I then made sure to seal the vertical seams of the resin pour as well, using the same epoxy putty. While the silicone seals, I can move to painting the miniatures. For the octopus, I was just going for a vague, alive color, so I started with a heavy, dark airbrush of a purple color to serve as a base. Ultimately, for this octopus, it was a lot of dry brushing. I started with the dark purple color and I tried to bring it all the way up to an orange color. Ultimately, it wasn't overwhelmingly successful, but I was pretty satisfied with the final product. I did also make sure to give special attention to each of the tentacles, as those would be the tiny details that would be evident out of the water. For the eyes of the giant octopus, I wanted this to be where the monster really came out in this monster encounter. To do that, I put some green tesseract glow that highly contrasted the skin so that it really pops in the final diorama. Once satisfied with the painting of the octopus, I then applied a gloss varnish to the entirety of it. I want this octopus to appear as if it's emerging from the water. For the ship, I stuck to some pretty traditional colors. For all the exterior wood, I used a dark oaky contrast paint from Citadel. For the flags on the mast, I used a Vallejo deck tan. For the deck of the ship, I used a cork brown color. And then I used a gunmetal gray for all the detailing of the cannons and armaments on the ship. Then, as a final touch and sort of an accident, I made the flag look like a wild berry Pop-Tart. Once the paint had dried, I applied a matte varnish to the entirety of the ship. Next, I cleaned up and got ready for the resin pour. I used a bit of UV resin to seal the insides of the diorama. I'm not sure how necessary this was, I just got a little paranoid in the moment. Given the fact that I wanted the water to be very deep and ocean colored, I applied a blue ink, a green ink, and a pigment concentrate into the resin. Ultimately, it did turn out to be a little bit more pastel blue than Pacific blue than I intended, but I thought it was good enough to proceed. I then made a second batch of resin that was a little bit more the intended Pacific color. However, when layered on top of the deeper pigment, it didn't look quite right, so I ended up mixing it all together. Ultimately, I got a little bit better of a product than I was anticipating, given the fact that around the octopus, it looked like there was some bubbles appearing where it was emerging from the water. Then I went to put the pirate ship in. Editor Spencer break here. At this point, I make a really big mistake. I drop the ship in the resin. Remember, mistakes are okay. We're all learning. But very embarrassing, and this was the only footage I had, so I kept it. Let's get back to it. I did manage to save the boat, and it's important to remember mistakes are okay, but ultimately, I did manage to get it all set up, although it did make my hand shake a decent amount. Once the resin has hardened, we can then move to freeing it from its prism. Then, using my hobby knife, I cleaned each of the sides vertical and horizontal. Then I removed the masking tape from the rest of the base. Then I can finally clean up my workstation a bit. Then we can move to the detailing of the water. For this, I use the Woodland Scenics water effects line. I'm very fond of them. I then dabbed some water waves to the entirety of the base, giving it a nice irregular wavy pattern. Then, using a toothpick, I sculpted some water waves behind the boat, where the tentacles are coming out of the water, where the boat is making an impact with the water, and where the octopus is emerging from the water. Then I used some white water highlights to highlight the very edges of the waves, giving it that water bubble look. I also applied a dry brush off screen. Once everything's done, we can then clean up the sides with some black and move to some glamour shots. I'd like to take this moment to say thank you to each of you who stayed through to the end of this video. I really do appreciate it, and I really enjoy sharing my hobby process and sharing what I learn. Once again, this project comes from an art challenge set by Boylai Hobby Time. I'll include his channel below. He and his community make phenomenal projects on YouTube, and I can't recommend them enough. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll catch you in the next one.